In terms of how to not get tripped up as an international student on, all sorts of visas, like an F1 visa, CPT, OPT stuff, the reason why I'm making this video is because so much of the stuff you learn in hindsight, where you're like actively filling out an application with documents that you don't have, and then you're like, oh, you should have told me as a freshman that I needed those documents. So that's why I'm making this video. Disclaimer, I am obviously not a lawyer, not an international student advisor. To get the most up-to-date information, which might change over time, talk to your international student advisor. So the first and probably the most important tip is you need the original and a digital copy of every document the government or your school ever gives you. So that includes letters, that includes like official documents, that includes applications you submit yourself. You want full copies of everything. I'll link to the scanner that's free app that I use in order to do this. But the reason why this is important is because in the future, when you're applying for other visas, like maybe you're applying for a work visa, like a CPT or an OPT visa, or you're applying for an immigration thing in the future, they will need copies of every single document that you've had. And if you lose them, getting them from the government, I'm pretty sure is impossible. And then you will have to do the extra work of writing documents that are like, this is why I can't find this document, but this is what I think is on it, or like hounding various old systems that the government or your school has to try and get it. In other words, you will cause yourself infinitely more pain if you don't have the original and digital copy of every document you've ever gotten. So what's the difference when you're an active F1 student, so you're still a student, or when you've graduated but you're still on an F1 visa? So when you are an active student, one of the really important documents that you'll need is the I-20. And one of the things that will commonly trip people up is that you need a travel signature that's renewed every single year or 1 year from the last time that it was signed. Every time that happens, you actually get issued a new I-20. And again, you need an original and digital copy of all of those I-20s. If you come back to the country, so you're trying to re-enter the country and you don't have a valid travel signature, I think what happens is, one, not all officers look at it, but a lot of them do. If they notice that it's out of date, they can kind of do whatever they want. They can refuse you entry, they can return you back to the country that you came from. But what you can actually ask for is the I-515A, which is essentially like a IOU one, where in the next like 30 days or something like that, you write a letter about why this is not in violation of your visa and you actually just forgot to get your travel signature, etc. It's a pain in the butt, but it's a good last resort in case you forget your travel signature. You'll need your valid visa and a valid passport, which has at least 6 months left before you expire. If you're a Canadian, you actually don't have a visa because it's not required. Don't forget, and I forgot this many, many times, that schools can send you these documents even if you're abroad. And in fact, nowadays, they can actually email you these documents and you can print them yourself, which is great, but it still takes a few days because these people work like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday in American time zones. And if you are outside of that, they will not be able to help you. Things that you should have in your folder of important documents that you take when you're traveling anyways, even though I've never been checked for these, but they are recommended, is your CVIS fee receipt and bank statements to prove that you have the financial means to be in the country, enrollment verification so that you're a student at the school, and obviously you do need your vaccination status. So this all changes a little bit when you graduate and you are still, in this case, an F1 student on your OPT or STEM OPT visa. But you have all of the same requirements as above, but there are some things that have changed, and this is what tripped me up. So your travel signature, which used to be valid for 1 year at a time, is now only valid for 6 years. 6 months at a time. Again, if you don't get it renewed, and if you don't get it renewed like quickly enough, you will face all of the problems that I previously mentioned, which suck. So every time you think about leaving the country, you should always think, do I have a valid travel signature? As someone who's been stuck outside of the country without a travel signature, it is now something I have like ingrained in my brain. Some new things that you will need to bring with you are now an employment verification letter, preferably with your salary, which is different than the enrollment verification letter. And you will also need your little EAD card. What's interesting is that the EAD card is not enough to let you in the country, but if you don't have it, you can get into a lot of trouble. And oh my God, getting one replaced, I learned this recently because I thought I lost mine. Getting one replaced requires you to fill out the entire application all over again. So instead of saying, hey, can you give me another card? I've already been approved for STEM OPT, for example. It's, hey, I need to now apply for STEM OPT all over again. So again, if you don't follow the rules exactly as they stated, you will cause yourself so much more pain. Okay, in the last few sections, I just have a few bonus things to keep in mind. The first is that after you graduate, actually, generally speaking, but especially after you graduate, every time you change locations, as well as every 6 months at minimum, you will have to re-report to the government like your location and all like your employment and stuff like that. That's a requirement. The second thing is generally you should just have a list of every date down to the day, month, year of when you entered and left the US, unless it was like a 1 hour layover or something like that. The reason why this is important is because every single tax year, they're going to ask you for all of that information as an international student. And even if you're like done doing taxes, by the time you go for applying for other immigration visas so that you can stay in the US longer or something like that, you will need that information to the day. And they will confirm or deny it and potentially like deny your application because it is off to the day. So I just have a list of that I constantly add to on my computer for safekeeping. Okay, the last two things I'm gonna say sound contradictory, but they're not. The first is that just as a rule of thumb, remember that the government does not care if the rule doesn't make sense or if it's really hard to follow or if it was impossible for you to like follow the rule because you were out of the country and you didn't have a printer or something like that. All of that is to say, I think generally speaking, I think it's like Occam's razor or whatever that rule is, which is like if something seems, you go to like the simplest explanation. If something seems unreasonable, then you're like, oh, this can't be the case. That's not the case with like the government when it comes to immigration stuff. If something seems unreasonable, you still have to follow it and they don't really care about your specific circumstance. So, and they can kick you out of the country forevermore if you don't follow it. So visa stuff is actually very important to get right, which is why I make, videos like this. And at the same time, the last thing I'm gonna say, which sounds a little bit contradictory, but it's not, is that even if you think you're in a horrible situation, one, definitely go contact your like international student advisor and people who really know what they're talking about, or an international student lawyer. But there's often like a way to like explain to the government why you messed something up or why you didn't have this piece of paper or something like that. It's probably much more complicated, much more expensive, and much more circuitous. But if you're in a really bad situation, just know that there might be a second chance. You just need to get proper advice from a international student advisor or someone like that. If you have any more questions about being an international student in the US, let me know. I was on the F1 visa, I applied for CPT, I've done OPT, I've done STEM OPT, and I've reported my taxes the whole time. In other words, I've gone through the pain of each and every one of those things. Stay safe out there and read things carefully and read things early. It's really rough.